I want you to get together.
So, in terms of flood survival, we're talking post-flood, pre-flood Nephilim here. Now, from what I gathered of the timeline is that maybe about 120 years, they say roughly, maybe 200 years before the flood is when the Nephilim were kind of forced to kill each other off in bloody battles and wars as a punishment for the Watchers who created them to watch their own beloved ones, their children, kill each other, basically, and also turn on them and try to kill them in the desire to want to be the only gods around, pride and hubris. The Nephilim weren't the most intelligent of people, you know. They they thought they could kill their own angelic parents, type of thing. They were quite stupid. So the big ones, the original ones, killed each other. They were destroyed, you know, quite a while before the flood. But there was that period of time. I think it's the Book of Jasher talks about this, if I can remember correctly. It could be Jubilees. I think it's Jasher. It talks about the mixing of kinds that happened around 120 years period just before the flood came. And this is human beings mixing themselves somehow with animals, or mixing animals together, creating hybrid chimeras such as
Book of
mermaids.
Enoch of Giants
Yeah,
talks about
yeah,
that as
and
well.
they call them the monsters in the Book of Giants, don't they? So they have the giants, then you have the monsters, and it seems like these were Nephil and Elio that survived. So the
Yeah.
big main Nephilim were killed, but their children kind of weren't a part of that original punishment for the Watchers. So there were still lesser giants around, and I
Yes.
call these humans who manipulated their DNA faux Nephilim. They're kind of like they're not really Nephilim in a sense,
Yeah.
but you could put them under the category of corrupted beings
Yes.
that have removed from
They're
creation.
unique.
They're
Yeah.
unique because they have human animal traits which the Nephilim didn't necessarily have, such as centaurs, the Taurus type people, the half horse, half fish, half bird
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
you know, and these are entities that could survive a flood. They could swim in above the rain, above the clouds. They could fly, or they could swim within the waters. They're not on the land, so they're not going to get
Yeah.
destroyed by the flood in that sense. Could this have been a preparation by these humans who were warned that a flood was coming to manipulate themselves in a way where they could survive the coming judgment? And so, first of all, that's one question I've got for you. But the second is, would there have been an incursion of these entities after the flood, which would have created some of these, like I said, patriarchless nations?
Yeah.
Or would they have maybe had genetic information within them from the process which was extracted to introduce the Nephilim gene into the post-flood? What do
Yeah.
you think was the main cause? Because it could be many, not just one. I understand, like I said, Upnapishtim, the Epic of Gilgamesh, a Nephilim survival story. All the kings by that point were Nephilim rulers. We have a Nephilim king surviving, so he would have just carried on as normal after the flood, you know. And it does seem like Nimrod helped in many
Yeah.
ways. The Nephilim re-established themselves. He
Yes.
was kind of a Nephilim lover. He idolized them. He wanted to be like them. It's possible he did in some way become like a Gibberim in that respect, you know. What do you think happened? I've thrown a lot of stuff in my mind at you.
Yeah.
Can you piece it
There is.
together in a narrative for me? Can you make it
Yeah.
cohesive?
Yeah, and I do think like Nimrod intermarried with the giants and started a hybrid giant dynasty and bloodlines after the flood. Um, and I cover that in both books. Um, and that passage from the book of Jubilees, I read that more as after the flood,
Okay.
but I understood that that likely was happening before the flood as well, and we get that from other accounts. So,
Mhm.
um, so I think it was happening on both sides of the flood. Now, if you're going into the flood and you know it's coming, just as in the book of Giants, the giants go to Enoch and say, can you intervene for us and stuff like that. And then people like Gilgamesh from before the flood actually try and go into heaven and kill the gods for the flood coming, right?
Yeah.
They're so upset. Um, so all of that starts to sort of track that they're going to do things in preparation. And it's more than just the monuments that they're going to build to remember that ancient civilization,
Mhm.
but can they survive the flood? Now they can get angelic help, which I think is as the distinct possibilities, but maybe they took things on their own as well. That we're speculating here, but and that they found ways on their own as well to have some of these chimera type beings or crossbred type of beings to survive the flood.
Hmm.
What we learned from the book of Genesis, where you can make an argument for giants surviving the flood and then tagging on to that other beings surviving the flood is when you look at the world that is going on, the whole world was corrupted, which is the Hebrew word shakath. So everything was being destroyed, DNA and manipulated and stuff like that. But God said he's only going to destroy all the beings he created. It says that in both Genesis 6 and Genesis 7. He didn't create the giants. He didn't create these hybrid beings. So you can make a legalistic argument that those beings, perhaps on their own or with the help of angels, on the earth, off the earth, able to fly themselves into the water, all the different sort of possibilities there that some were able to survive. I also think you can make a good case, just as we talk about Gilgamesh story and the survival story, that there's a second incursion going on, and particularly with the Baalim from the Ugaritic text where it talks about that, with the Rephaim, and then the Greek mythology, and again, more sources than that. That there, if you're going to do the same violations of that after the flood, you probably are going to recreate things like the scorpion beings, which show up in the Epic of Gilgamesh again after the flood, that
Hmm.
were created before the flood. So, yeah, I think there's a distinct possibility that some of these creatures either were recreated or survived or both.
Hmm.
I lean heavily more towards second incursion, a second creation by the offspring gods. It just, for me, from a Christian perspective, it meshes better biblically. But because we don't have a smoking gun verse after the flood, like you have before the flood with Genesis 6:4, we only see the giants show up after the flood. Possibility remains open. And I, like a lot of people, when I look at Genesis 6:4, where it says the sons of God went to the daughters of human and created the Nephilim and did so again,
Hmm.
would look at that possibly as after the flood again, but not definitively.
No.
And or it could also mean many times before the flood they went to the daughters, or it could mean all of it.
Hmm.
We just don't have that clear cut first like we do that giants were definitely created as Nephilim after the flood, but peculiarly and something distinct about them, they're called Rephaim
Rephaim.
after the flood.
Yeah, someone in my Telegram group recently was theorizing on the word Rephaim, why they called something different than they were prior to the flood. And it seems like Rephaim is this strange concept of uh, risen from the dead, or dead healed, or the dead ones, or a revival or a healing of some kind. It's
Yeah.
hinted within the language and the etymology behind it. So it
Yeah.
could be that
So
they are
here
resurrected. But
yes.
I'll let you go. Yeah.
Here's how that flows. So it's 7495 is the root word for Raphaim, RPM, and we see that in the root word as Rapha, R-A-P-H. And in the Ugaritic text, they were known as healers. They could all only heal themselves, but they could heal others.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons why you had to kill them with beheading or something so swiftly that they couldn't repair themselves, either through technology or just through a self healing capability. But they had that healing nature about it. So Rapha 7495 means to heal or medicine, and words like that, or a physician. So, like Raphael, an angel, could mean God heals or healer of God.
Yeah.
And so, what's also interesting is that some of the bloodlines of these kings, Merovingians would be the most famous of it, who had more of a Gilgamesh type of look with a dark curly hair and dark beards, were said to have healing capability as well. So that's part of that shepherd king, fisher king mythos that goes those dynastic bloodlines.
Hmm.
So 7497 is sourced in 7495. and that means a giant or a tribe of giants.
Mhm.
But they're connected. So just as in the Ugaritic text, and I cover this off in detail in the new book for people,
Mhm.
um, 7497 is Rapha, male plural Rephaim. They're described in the Ugaritic text as these demigod kings, part of the assembly of the Datanu, and they're going to take, and they're warriors. Like that's where Gibborim comes from. There's a tribe of Gibbor, GBR, as it's in the original Ugaritic text for mighty ones.
Mhm.
And you have these ones that not only can heal, but they're also ruling these dynasties and are able to take people through portals, go through portals themselves, and take dead ones through portals to the where the gods are living in the underworld. And then there's another word that's in between is 7496, which means a shed in Hebrew, which is a shay, S-I-D-G, is with the tuatha dud and nan, and it means a ghost, and it means an evil spirit and a demon spirit.
Mhm.
And this is their counterfeit spirit, part of the name. So 74, 95, 96, 97 describes what the Ugaritic texts are describing in different aspects, that even afterwards, when their spirit didn't go to sleep, they're being guided to go to through the ones who are still alive to get to the underworld as this bodiless, disembodied spirit. So
Mhm.
yes, it's directly connected, and it starts to answer a whole bunch of questions as to why they are so difficult to kill,
Mhm. Well, yeah, the whole beheading thing I've heard.
other than their size.
Well, other than that, I mean, yeah, who can stand against a giant at the end of the day? Obviously, David managed all right. He did okay in the end. So it seems like
Yeah,
if you have enough faith,
but he didn't leave it with the stone, did he?
no, no, he took the head off and lifted it up, and then the
He
Philistines
wanted to make,
ran, didn't
he
you?
wanted
Yeah,
to make sure he stayed dead.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's the whole the modern zombie mythos comes to mind of you got to shoot them in the head, otherwise they don't stay down
Yeah,
type of thing, you know. And
yeah,
you talk about the living dead here, and the Rephaim are, in a sense, the
living
resurrected
dead.
Nephilim in a way. I mean, could it possibly be someone made a hint that there would have been a lot of floating giant bodies around after the flood? And is it possible through the guiding of the spirits from this other world again, the dead ones, the disembodied spirits were re-injected back into remaining bodies? This is another just a speculation, pure speculation, but just
Yeah,
to try and link
it's
into
a
this idea
possibility.
of resurrected or
Yep.
healed dead ones in some way with
Yeah.
Rapha and Rephaim. There's something suspicious
They
about
would
how they
still have
got
to
back.
find a way to keep the body alive, though, right? With
Well,
the
I
dead
guess so.
ones.
I guess I mean I don't know how how the spiritual realm and the physical realm with mystical beings that are
Yep.
part divine
Yep.
work. I don't.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
this
Yeah.
we have a
Who
gap, don't
does,
we?
right?
Exactly.
But if
Yeah.
they didn't, but if they didn't have their head severed,
Hmm.
and they had an ability to revive
Well, yeah.
dead ones, but then you would be saying it would probably be the drowned giants, let's say in this example, who maybe were looking for their own body
Hmm.
first, would settle for another body if they couldn't find it, right?
Well, yeah. I've heard people
Just on the
theorize.
speculation side of that.
I've heard other people speculate and theorize that many of these chimeric beings that were created after the flood
Yeah.
were kind of
Yeah.
lesser vessels created for the Nephilim to re-inhabit, that were
Yeah.
compatible, you know, because obviously you can't. It's they can try and possess humans, but it's messy and they're not really compatible, and they can cast them out with the right fasting and the right prayers and all that sort of thing. Especially in the modern age with Jesus, we have authority over them. It's not optimal now to possess a human, but it's possible the creation of chimeric-like beings are more compatible with the Nephilim spirit in some
Yeah.
respect, and that's why they were created post-flood, so they could have something to go back into that wasn't quite what they used to be, but still something compatible, some monstrous form, and that's just another way they were in some way reintroduced,
Yeah.
and possibly how in
Well,
the modern day
and
they
they
could be
would want
reintroduced.
to do that because, and again, when Jesus comes across these evil spirits, unclean spirits, those two terms are used interchangeably in those accounts with devils,
Hmm.
which is a really bad translation in the King James, because that's the Greek word daemon, which is the Greek root for demon.
Hmm.
So, and they're used interchangeably and together there. I have a great document on demons too, if people want. And so what Jesus said about these demons is that when they're disembodied, they don't have a place to rest, and they're like in a dry place. They're thirsty and they need a place to rest. The only place they can rest is in some sort of oikotarian
Hmm.
that they have to do a hostile takeover on. For the most part, I think certainly in the occult world that a lot of the adepts and shamans believe that you can have a symbiotic relationship if you have enough mystical knowledge to control that demon spirit,
Yeah.
right? Just like they believe Solomon controlled demon spirits. So I don't know whether that actually happens or not, or it ends up suppressing the original host or not. But they need to interact in the world and to have a place of rest. They need to go into a body, preferably a human body.
No, absolutely. Personally, I believe this whole idea that if you draw the right sigil or do the right incantation or put enough salt down, you can somehow exert control over a Nephilim spirit is just a
Yeah.
lie. I think the Nephilim spirit will allow you to believe you have some kind of control over them. If that's what you feel,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
if that makes you a willing vessel, then fine, you know. But I
Yeah.
think
Well,
truly we don't.
sure.
The only authority you have is through Jesus. You know, at the end of the day.
Well, and you'll appreciate this. This would be true to their nature as part of the trickster spirit hierarchy of the
Absolutely. Yeah.
true God and the demigod spirit as
Absolutely.
tricksters.
If you draw a circle on the ground and you do some incantation, say you can't leave that circle, the demon will
Yeah.
pretend to not be able to leave the circle. Like, oh, you've got
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't think you have any control over them unless
Yeah.
you are filled with the Holy Spirit and have that authority. And that's
Yeah.
essentially the only control. The true power in the world is through that. You know.
I want you to get together.